They tell you that some people are just naturally strong, that warriors are born with steel in their blood, that leaders emerge from the womb with command in their voice, that the powerful inherit their dominance like a family heirloom passed down through generations. This is the most destructive lie ever told to human beings. It is the lie that keeps the weak comfortable in their weakness and the strong silent about the hell they endured to become unbreakable. The strong are not born, they are forged in fire, not in the gentle warmth of comfort or the safe harbor of ease, but in the merciless furnace of adversity, pain, and relentless struggle that burns away everything soft, everything false, everything that cannot survive when reality shows its true face. To be strong is not a natural gift bestowed by genetic lottery. It is the prize awarded only to those who endure the unendurable and consciously choose the path that breaks others. Tonight, we descend into the philosophical crucible where strength is actually made. We will examine the testimonies of minds who understood that power must be earned in the currency of suffering, that resilience must be purchased with the price of repeated breaking, that true strength emerges only from the deliberate embrace of what others spend their lives trying to avoid. Through the cold insights of Friedrich Nietzsche, the ruthless pragmatism of Niccolò Machiavelli, the shadow wisdom of Carl Jung, the stoic discipline of Marcus Aurelius, and the existential courage of Jean-Paul Sartre, we will uncover the dark truth about what it actually takes to become strong. This is not motivational philosophy designed to make you feel better about your current limitations. This is not gentle encouragement wrapped in comfortable lies. This is the harsh metallurgy of the human soul, the brutal alchemy that transforms the base metal of ordinary existence into the tempered steel of authentic strength. By the end of this journey, you will understand why the strong seem so different from everyone else, why they carry themselves with a particular gravity that cannot be faked, and why they respond to crisis with a calm that appears almost inhuman to those who have never been tested in the fire that makes men into something more than men. Friedrich Nietzsche wielded philosophy like a hammer, shattering the comfortable illusions that keep humanity weak and dependent. His most devastating blow was struck against the myth of inherent strength, the belief that some people are simply born superior to others. "What does not destroy me makes me stronger," he declared, but this famous phrase masks a darker truth that most people miss entirely. Nietzsche was not describing the passive endurance of suffering, he was prescribing the active embrace of it as the only path to genuine power. Strength, in Nietzsche's understanding, is not inheritance. It is conquest. It is the will to power, exercised against all that would weaken, diminish, or placate the authentic self. The Übermensch, his vision of human potential actualized, is not a born noble, blessed with natural superiority. It is the self-made titan, forged by the deliberate choice to transform suffering into strength, adversity into advantage, pain into power. The fire that creates the strong is not random misfortune that happens to some and not to others. It is the consciously chosen path of those who refuse to accept mediocrity as their fate, who decline to seek comfort as their highest value, who will not tolerate the soft boundaries that others mistake for wisdom. Nietzsche understood that most people avoid the very experiences that would make them strong because they prefer the familiar pain of weakness to the transformative agony of becoming powerful. This is why the strong seem so alien to the weak. They have undergone a fundamental transformation that changes not just their capabilities, but their entire relationship with reality. Where the weak see obstacles, the strong see training equipment. Where the weak experience setbacks, the strong recognize sharpening stones. Where the weak encounter resistance, the strong find the friction necessary to build momentum. They have learned to extract strength from the very conditions that break others, because they have learned to see strength as something that must be continuously earned rather than permanently possessed. Niccolò Machiavelli understood the political dimension of strength with crystalline clarity. He observed that in the real world, not the fantasy world of moral philosophy, but the actual arena where survival and dominance are determined, strength is never granted by kindness, fairness, or good intentions. It is seized by decisiveness, maintained through strategic intelligence, and demonstrated through the willingness to do what others find unthinkable when necessary circumstances demand it. The strong, in Machiavelli's analysis, do not plead for what they need. They take it. They do not hope for favorable conditions. They create them. They do not wait for permission to act according to their judgment. They act and accept the responsibility for consequences. They use the sharp edge of necessity to carve their place in a world of relentless competition, where weakness is not pitied but exploited, where hesitation is not forgiven but punished, where strength is not admired but feared and respected in equal measure. Weakness, from this perspective, is a luxury that only the dead can afford. The living must choose between becoming strong enough to shape their circumstances or remaining weak enough to be shaped by them. There is no middle ground, no comfortable compromise, no safe position from which to observe the struggle without participating in it. The fire of reality burns away all such illusions, leaving only those who have been tempered by its heat and those who have been consumed by their inability to withstand it. Machiavelli's prince learned strength not through theoretical study, but through practical engagement with the forces that destroy the unprepared. Political power, personal influence, and even basic survival require capabilities that can only be developed through direct confrontation with adversity that tests every assumption, every strategy, every aspect of character. The prince who inherits power without earning it remains forever vulnerable to those who had to fight for theirs. The leader who never faced rebellion learns nothing about loyalty that cannot be tested when times become difficult. Carl Jung revealed the psychological dimension of this transformation, showing that the fire which forges strength burns not only in external circumstances, but in the deepest recesses of the unconscious mind. His exploration of the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we reject, repress, and project onto others, uncovered the dark truth that our greatest potential strength often lies hidden in what we most desperately want to avoid about ourselves. The battle between light and shadow is not a conflict between good and evil as traditionally understood, but a confrontation between the acceptable self we present to the world and the complete self that includes capacities for anger, aggression, dominance, and destruction that civilized society teaches us to shame and suppress. True strength arises not when these shadow elements are successfully repressed, but when they are consciously integrated, owned, and directed toward chosen purposes, rather than allowed to operate unconsciously through self-sabotage and projection. Jung observed that individuals who had undergone what he called the dark night of the soul, periods of profound psychological crisis, breakdown, and reconstruction, often emerged with capabilities and insights that those who had lived consistently comfortable lives entirely lacked. They had been forced to confront aspects of themselves and reality that others never face, developing psychological muscles that cannot be built through any other means. The fire of shadow integration burns away the comforting illusions that keep most people psychologically fragmented and weak. The false self that seeks only approval, comfort, and safety must be destroyed before the authentic self can emerge with access to the full spectrum of human capabilities. This destruction feels like death because, in a sense, it is the death of who you thought you were in service of becoming who you actually are, when all pretenses are stripped away. The strong have survived this internal apocalypse and emerged with access to psychological resources that the unintegrated cannot imagine. They can be ruthless when ruthlessness serves their purposes, because they own their capacity for destruction rather than denying it. They can be compassionate when compassion is strategic, because they choose their emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. They can endure isolation when isolation is necessary, because they have found the source of validation within themselves rather than depending on external approval. Marcus Aurelius, writing his philosophical meditations while commanding Roman legions on the Germanic frontier, understood strength from the perspective of Stoic discipline, the cold mathematics of endurance, the systematic training of will, the deliberate cultivation of indifference to circumstances that cannot be controlled. His insights emerge not from academic speculation, but from the practical necessity of maintaining psychological stability while surrounded by constant threat political intrigue, and the burden of decisions that affect millions of lives. The obstacle is the way, Aurelius wrote, articulating a principle that transforms the entire relationship between challenge and growth. What appears as opposition to be overcome is actually the mechanism through which strength is developed. Without obstacles, there is no opportunity to build the psychological muscles necessary for greater challenges. Without resistance, there is no friction against which to develop power. Without adversity, there is no way to discover the capabilities that remain dormant during comfort. The Stoic approach to strength is not the suppression of emotion, but the training of emotional response according to rational evaluation of what serves long-term objectives versus short-term impulses. The strong do not feel less than the weak. They feel more, but they have learned to process intense emotion through the filter of strategic intelligence rather than allowing it to dictate their actions directly. Aurelius understood that the soul tempered by hardship becomes like a blade sharpened by repeated contact with resistant materials, harder, more durable, more capable of cutting through obstacles that would dull a softer instrument. But this tempering requires the deliberate choice to engage with difficulty rather than avoid it, to seek out challenges that test current limitations rather than remain safely within proven capabilities. The Emperor Philosopher's meditations reveal the daily discipline required to maintain strength once it has been forged. Strength is not a permanent achievement, but a continuous practice, not a destination but a direction, not a state but a process that must be renewed through consistent engagement with the forces that originally created it. The strong remain strong by continuing to do the things that made them strong, by refusing to allow comfort to soften what adversity had hardened. Jean-Paul Sartre contributed the existentialist understanding that strength must be chosen rather than inherited, created rather than discovered, taken responsibility for rather than attributed to circumstances beyond our control. His famous declaration that existence precedes essence means that we become what we choose to become through our actions, rather than expressing some pre-existing nature that determines our capabilities and limitations. From the existentialist perspective, the fire that forges strength is not something that happens to us, but something we create through the choices we make when confronted with the fundamental anxiety of human freedom. Most people flee from this freedom into what Sartre called bad faith, the pretense that their limitations are imposed by external circumstances rather than chosen through their response to those circumstances. The strong embrace the terrifying responsibility of self-creation, recognizing that they are condemned to be free and that this condemnation is actually an opportunity disguised as a burden. Every moment presents the choice between becoming stronger or remaining weak, between accepting greater responsibility or avoiding it, between expanding capabilities or defending current limitations. The strong choose expansion, even when it requires enduring the anxiety that comes with leaving familiar territory for unknown challenges. Sartre's analysis of authentic existence reveals that strength requires the courage to act without guarantees, to choose without certainty, to take responsibility without being able to predict or control all outcomes. This courage cannot be developed through safe practice or comfortable preparation. It can only be forged through repeated engagement with genuine risk, real stakes, and the possibility of significant failure. The existentialist strong person does not claim that their strength came from favorable circumstances, genetic advantages, or external support. They take full responsibility for becoming strong through the choices they made when faced with the same fundamental human condition that everyone faces: the anxiety of freedom, the burden of self-creation, and the necessity of acting without complete knowledge or guaranteed success. The fires that forge the strong are not metaphorical, but viscerally real, burning away everything that cannot survive contact with uncompromising reality. These fires burn away illusions about how the world works, fantasies about what strength looks like, and comfortable assumptions about what is required to survive and thrive in conditions of genuine challenge. They consume false comfort, the artificial security that comes from avoiding difficulty rather than developing the capability to handle it. They burn away childish fantasies about fairness, about help being provided when needed, about others taking responsibility for outcomes that belong to us. They destroy the weak self that seeks to be taken care of, protected, and kept safe from the consequences of its own choices and limitations. What remains after this burning is the indestructible core, the aspect of the self that can endure any external pressure, that can function regardless of circumstances, that can maintain integrity when everything else is stripped away. This core cannot be built through comfortable practice or pleasant preparation. It can only be revealed through conditions that eliminate everything else, that remove all supports and buffers and dependencies, that force total reliance on internal resources that may not have been previously discovered or tested. There is no pity in this forge, no gentle encouragement, no accommodation for preference or comfort. The fire burns impartially, consuming weakness wherever it is found, regardless of whether that weakness is cherished, justified, or socially acceptable. Those who enter this fire with the expectation of sympathy or special consideration discover that reality recognizes no such claims. Those who shrink from the flame, who seek to avoid the heat through compromise, negotiation, or appeals to fairness, remain brittle, destined to crack beneath their first encounter with conditions that test their actual capabilities rather than their theoretical knowledge or good intentions. Their untested strength proves to be elaborate weakness the moment it faces real pressure. Those who enter willingly, who seek out the fire rather than avoiding it, who understand that being burned is the price of being tempered, find themselves reborn through a process of conscious destruction and reconstruction. They discover that what they thought would destroy them actually reveals capabilities they never knew they possessed, resources they never knew they could access, strength they never imagined they could develop. This willing entry into the fire distinguishes true strength from mere toughness, authentic power from simple stubbornness, genuine resilience from basic survival. The strong do not simply endure what they cannot avoid. They actively seek out the conditions that will force them to transcend their current limitations, knowing that growth requires the destruction of previous boundaries. Strength, when properly understood, is refusal. Refusal to yield when yielding serves no strategic purpose. Refusal to accept excuses when excuses prevent necessary action. Refusal to tolerate lesser versions of yourself when greater versions remain possible. It is the marriage of cold calculation with fierce passion, the fusion of unyielding discipline with relentless ambition, the integration of ruthless realism with visionary determination. The strong become architects of their own destruction and resurrection, deliberately creating conditions that will eliminate their current limitations, even when this process is painful, uncertain, and socially unsupported. Every fall becomes not failure, but planned obsolescence of capabilities that are no longer sufficient. Every scar becomes a blueprint of resilience that can be referenced during future challenges. Every setback becomes a lesson in unbreakability that prepares for greater tests ahead. This architectural approach to strength development requires the psychological sophistication to distinguish between destruction that serves growth and destruction that merely wastes resources, between pain that builds capability and pain that only creates damage, between challenge that expands limits and challenge that only confirms them. The strong learn to calibrate their exposure to difficulty so that they are consistently operating at the edge of their capabilities without exceeding them catastrophically. To seek out fire becomes not masochism, but survival strategy, in a world where the untested are eventually eliminated by conditions they never prepared to handle. To walk through shadows becomes not madness, but awakening to aspects of reality that the comfort-seeking never encounter. To embrace what others avoid becomes not perversity, but practical recognition that strength can only be built through engagement with the forces that test it. The furnace of adversity operates as the dark forge where character is welded under pressure, and heat that reveal the true composition of human material. What you allow to burn determines what remains unbreakable. What you choose to expose to heat determines what becomes tempered. What you willingly subject to pressure determines what emerges harder than it entered. This process cannot be delegated, outsourced, or avoided through clever strategy. There is no way to become strong without actually becoming strong. No method for developing capabilities without actually developing them. No technique for building resilience without actually building it through repeated exposure to conditions that test and expand current limits. The strong understand that existence itself is structured as a testing mechanism, a continuous examination that separates those who have prepared from those who have avoided preparation, those who have developed their capabilities from those who have merely hoped they possess them, those who have earned their strength through practice from those who have only imagined what strength might feel like. Existence reveals its nature as relentless demand for performance, for capability, for the strength to handle whatever challenges emerge without warning or consideration for whether you feel ready to handle them. The strong have learned to meet this demand, not through complaint or negotiation, but through the continuous development of their capacity to respond effectively, regardless of circumstances. This understanding transforms the entire relationship with difficulty, challenge, and apparent misfortune. What others experience as punishment, the strong recognize as education. What others interpret as unfair treatment, the strong see as realistic preparation. What others avoid as unnecessary suffering, the strong engage as necessary training for tests that have not yet appeared but will inevitably arrive. The weak plead for easier conditions, gentler treatment, more time to prepare, and protection from consequences they have not earned the right to avoid. They seek to negotiate with reality as if it were a reasonable partner, rather than an impartial force that responds only to demonstrated capability and earned strength. The strong understand that reality negotiates only with power, that circumstances yield only to superior force, that challenges disappear only when capabilities exceed them significantly enough to make them irrelevant. They focus their energy not on changing external conditions, but on developing internal capabilities that can handle any conditions they might encounter. Strength, properly understood, is not a gift but a verdict, a judgment delivered by reality based on performance rather than potential, demonstrated through results rather than proclaimed through intentions. This verdict cannot be appealed, revised, or overturned through argument. It can only be changed through the development of actual capabilities that alter the basis on which the judgment is made. You deliver this verdict to yourself through every choice to endure rather than escape, to engage rather than avoid, to develop capability rather than seek accommodation, to take responsibility rather than make excuses. The strong are not born with this verdict in their favor. They earn it through the accumulation of decisions that build rather than preserve, that expand rather than protect, that risk rather than guarantee. The process of earning this verdict requires the recognition that your current strength, whatever it may be, is insufficient for the challenges you have not yet encountered. It requires the humility to acknowledge that comfortable capabilities are not tested capabilities, that theoretical knowledge is not practical skill, that good intentions are not effective performance. Most importantly, it requires the commitment to begin this process now, rather than waiting for more convenient circumstances, clearer directions, or guaranteed outcomes. The forge is available at every moment, heated by whatever challenges you currently face, ready to transform whatever raw material you bring to it, through your willingness to be shaped by heat and pressure into something harder than you currently are. Your time is not later when conditions improve, when you feel more prepared, or when the cost seems more reasonable. Your moment is not when it gets easier, more comfortable, or more socially supported. Your destiny is not found in waiting for permission, encouragement, or ideal circumstances that will never arrive because they are not necessary for the work of becoming strong. The fire burns now. The forge operates now. The opportunity to be tempered and strengthened exists now in whatever challenges you are currently avoiding, whatever difficulties you are currently minimizing, whatever growth you are currently postponing until some imaginary future when you will be more ready to handle what you are already capable of handling if you choose to develop that capability through practice rather than through preparation. Forge yourself now. in the heat of current circumstances, through engagement with current challenges, by taking current responsibility for developing the strength you will need for future tests you cannot predict or control. Every day you wait is another day of remaining brittle when you could be becoming tempered, another day of staying weak when you could be growing stronger. The strong are forged in fire, because fire is the only force that can burn away what is unnecessary, while hardening what is essential, that can consume what is weak, while strengthening what can survive, that can destroy what is false while revealing what is true. This fire burns continuously, fed by the challenges that surround you, heated by the resistance you encounter, intensified by the difficulties you choose to engage rather than avoid. This is your trial, not some future test, but the current examination that life is administering through your present circumstances. This is your crucible, not some dramatic moment of crisis, but the daily opportunity to choose strength over weakness, growth over comfort, engagement over avoidance. This is the dark, cold truth of becoming strong. It happens through the accumulation of choices that most people avoid making because they prefer the familiar pain of weakness to the transformative agony of strength. The question that determines everything is simple. Will you enter the fire that forges the strong, or will you remain in the cold that preserves the weak? Will you seek out the heat that tempers metal into tools capable of cutting through any obstacle, or will you avoid the discomfort that keeps you soft enough to be shaped by whatever forces you encounter? The fire burns whether you enter it or not. The forge operates whether you use it or not. The opportunity to become strong exists whether you take it or not. But you will become either what the fire makes of you when you engage it consciously, or what the cold makes of you when you avoid it consistently. The strong are not born, they are forged in fire. The only question is whether you will be among them or continue to wonder what strength feels like from the safe distance of those who chose comfort over capability, security over strength, the familiar limits of weakness over the unknown possibilities of power. Enter the fire, become unbreakable, forge yourself into something that cannot be destroyed by any circumstances you might encounter, something that grows stronger through contact with resistance, something that transforms challenge into capability and adversity into advantage. The fire is waiting. Your strength is waiting. Your future self is waiting to be forged from the raw material of who you are now, through the conscious choice to become what you are capable of becoming, when you stop protecting your weaknesses and start building your strength. This is not philosophy. This is metallurgy. This is the science of transformation through heat and pressure, applied to human potential until it becomes human actuality. The formula is simple. The process is brutal. The results are permanent. The strong are forged in fire. Will you be forged, or will you be consumed by the same flames that temper others into steel? Your answer lies not in your words, but in your willingness to enter the furnace of becoming and emerge as something harder than what entered. The fire burns now. Enter it.